concept review, thing we're going to talk about. We talked about, or I tweeted out that we're going to talk about angles. Angles. What about angles? Well, we're kind of going to talk about Chengdu's comp with angles, but the general idea is we're going to talk about the strength of angles, right? We're going to talk about setting up angles. And we're going to talk about how this applies with regard to different kind of compositions. And I'm going to kind of show this as well based off of something as well, like as an extra note, is I'm going to show you, and I showed some of you guys this already when I was going through macro. I'm going to show you what I call tic-tac-toe. Whoa. Toe. Or as the Aussies call tic-tac-toe, X's and O's, like degenerates, but it's okay. Not too bad. But this is kind of the concept I'm going to go through. We're going to utilize dive for this because dive with angles is very easy to talk about. It's very easy to visualize the angles. It's very easy to identify how to utilize these mobile characters to set up how you want them to, right? Blank esports moment, lol. Dude, there's so many blank esports stories I could tell you, man. But like I said, dive is one of the easiest ways to talk about angles. It's one of the easiest ways that I taught teams angles, how to abuse them, how to set them up very easily, and then how that kind of determined kill boxes and all that kind of stuff out, right, in the strengths. So we'll talk about angles real quick, the concept of it, why angles are important, what they do, what they allow you to do. And we'll start with Hunter's Comp, right? Specifically on defense. Like I'll skip ahead a little bit and we'll go. So talking about the concept of angles and utilizing Chengdu's comp a little bit first before I go into gameplay to kind of show you and break it down is we see that they're on very mobile characters, right? Pharah's quite mobile. Mercy, in relativity to being able to attach onto someone, can be very mobile. Sombra is very mobile, right? Ball is incredibly mobile. D.Va's quite mobile as well. The only person that is not mobile on their team is the Ana. And that's not too concerning, right? If you look at this, I circled 5 characters that are mobile. It's okay to have one non-mobile person in a very high mobile composition, right? And the reason why is because most of the time, how you set up angles will be not just around where you're expecting to fight, it will also be based off of where that non-mobile character will play. So for example, we'll kind of go over here and I'll circle it in black here. Monk will likely play here, which means the angles that we're going to set up and the areas that we're going to look to engage will be maybe towards, go like this. I'll use green for this. Will maybe be around this area or be around this area, right? It will never be in areas where Monk cannot have a good LOS, right? So we won't likely see people dive over here unless Monk is set up more aggressively, maybe over here, right? So it's all about being able to play around specifically not just where you want to set up, where they're looking to rotate, where you want to fight. It's also about playing around where your least mobile character is in a lot of these situations, right? So moving forward from there, we'll kind of talk about this again. So in terms of setting up angles specifically and looking at the strengths, most of the time the strength with being able to set up angles or take angles is one of 2 things. Number one, and we'll do this in pink. Number one, with angles, the thing that you have to keep in mind is you win the game with angles most of the time over time. When you're utilizing angles, you can go for a burst play is what I call it, where you're looking to burst the enemy team in a few moments. But most of the time when you're playing the angle game, you're not looking to overwhelm them right away. You're looking to simply utilize all these angles, split up the enemy team, and force individual duels to happen. And then you get value over time from taking those individual duels and splitting up the enemy team at that point, right? And this is where it comes from the second point of view with angles, right? And it's all about utilizing these mobile characters, right, to specifically set up in positions that are relevant to themselves, right? So for example, my ball will likely, I'll use like ball in yellow, my ball will likely probably set up towards this area, or my ball will probably set up towards this coast area, compared to, for example, on here or over here. Why is that? Ball is a very mobile character, right? So he can take more aggressive angles. He's also very tanky. He can take more aggressive angles. This doesn't just apply to Gaga, this probably applies to Late Young too. Late Young can play those very forward angles, right? Because he's allowed to. More like squishier characters, right? Jinmu is probably not going to play in these areas that are potentially the first angles that characters will see. He'll play more towards, and I'm going to move this way. Whoop. There we go. I know like this kind of scuffs up this little stuff. I'll move this back. I can't move it back. Let's do it like that. There we go. This works. Perfect. So like I said, like Gaga and specifically Late Young might play these kind of aggressive angles, right? Whereas on the side of Jinmu can't like play that aggressively, right? So Jinmu is coming to towards the circle area. He'll probably play more as close again as he can to this choke, but he's going to hold that different angle that's a little bit more safer. A wall where he can look to LOS a little bit more easily, right? A wall he can conk against. Not in this open area or this tight area where it's going to be very rough for him to get that value. He'll be one of the first people to be seen, whereas with that wall, he might be the first person, right? But they have to swing past that corner. So as long as there's someone a little bit closer, he won't be the first person they see. And even if he is, right, he's in the air. So they have to look up. They can't just look straight. Which leaves Leave, right? Leave is Sombra. Leave should be able to take any angle in the game because he's invisible. Unless he gets spy check, which shouldn't happen very often. If he's smart and he's patient, he'll set up always behind them in this kind of vicinity where the box is, right? Not in this position, but in a position behind, right? So most of the time we'll probably see them execute, if I'm going to be honest, over here, right? In this choke area, not letting them get out for free, always consistently trying to keep them there, because this will create the best opportunities and best angles to take from the hunters, right? They can let them walk in a little bit, and maybe instead of taking the fight over here, they'll take it over here, but then Pharaoh will have to back up and play, instead of this angle, she'll probably have to play all the way back here, play this angle, or she'll have to play with Monk on top here, which is less favorable, because you're giving up angles, right? And this is where it kind of comes in with regard to the strength in setting up these angles. I've talked about ease. The characters that are more mobile, more tanky will take those more aggressive angles. Those angles people will see first. The other angles, the harder angles to try to connect onto from the enemy team is where the squishier members will kind of take, or the members that are more isolated by themselves, right? So Leave and Monk are taking potentially safer angles because they can set up there really easily, or it's really hard for the enemy to look at them right away. Jinmu is playing in a little bit still of an aggressive position, but not too aggressive to where will get instantly shot down or he'll be in an awkward spot. He's playing in a position where he can still get a lot of damage. He gets the healing from the Mercy Pocket, but he won't be the first person they see all the time, right? So utilizing this here, right? Again, these squishies, they're playing to set up angles in a very effective way based off of them. So you play for ease as well. Ease of angles based off of who you are as a character, right? And like I said, Monk will play like over here. Whoopsies. There we go. Monk will play over here, right? So if I look at these angles, right? If Leave's coming over here, I have potentially an angle from here or, over here, one of the two. I'm kind of combining those arrows, an angle over here, and this last angle from Monk over here, right? These are 4 angles, right? And with ease, you want to try to make sure with angles, you're at least, and specifically dive against a more kind of stuck together composition, you want to at least set up 3 angles, right? Most of the time, your goal when you're trying to play a composition where you're playing slow and you're playing for these angles, for dive, for like another good example is spam compositions, right? Double sniper, where you're playing the map, you're looking to set up at least 3 angles. If you cannot set up 3 angles, 2 is a good indicator of like necessity. You should never be at 1. Brawl is where you mainly have 1 angle, maybe 2. And that's just because of different circumstances. But again, talking about angles, talking about how we can utilize them, especially in this kind of brawl. 3 is the maximum. Same with more compositions that rely on space and utilizing space properly, right? And like I said, it goes different from comp to comp, right? So these are the things that we need to kind of keep in mind, right? Last thing I'll talk about, tic-tac-toe. And I will show you what I mean by tic-tac-toe in a moment when we look through this first fight. Okay. So playing out this first fight, and then I'll kind of shoot things through and kind of show you a little bit more of what I see and some cool stuff, right? We look at this first fight, right? Remember how I talked about we're likely going to try to see an engagement over here, and we're going to see aggressive angles kind of get taken, right? We do see that Late Young and we do see that Jinmu are kind of playing the same angle here, but Gaga is playing towards more so this mini, right? Leave is looking to set up already. Watch how Chengdu look to approach this fight, right? Already, like, don't you see, like, pretty much exactly the point I was talking about? Monk is playing this angle. Jinmu and Leave are playing the exact same angle compared to Gaga and late, or sorry, Jinmu and Late Young are playing the same angle here, right? This is, we'll call it angle B. Monk is playing angle A. Gaga came from this way, which is angle C, and Leave wrapped all the way around to play angle D, right? Perfect. 4 angles is exactly what you want. Sometimes you're going to stack on a specific angle. In most cases, usually your tanks will stack up so they can support each other and hold that space for a longer period of time. But sometimes in other situations, right, most of the time you'll see it a little bit more with Ball. You'll see that the tanks will split and create crossfires more. Why? Because at that point, Ball doesn't really need that support because he has that high mobility. He has the shields in order to protect himself as well. He's not like a monkey where he needs that matrix a lot more. So you'll see D.Va kind of play a little bit on her own, play a little bit more to kind of set up that crossfire with the tank. But again, going to the angles, you see these 4 angles kind of come to light and you see how strong these 4 angles can be, right? Now, in terms of tic-tac-toe, right? I'll play out this fight first and then I'll show you tic-tac-toe after this and what I mean by tic-tac-toe and how you can utilize it to help you take angles and identify these angles, right? Looking at this, right? 4 attacks. They're all stuck in this little circle, right, from Glads. They're getting attacked from 4 different angles. What can Glads really realistically do? Most of the time, nothing. They're just gonna have to take this punishment. If they don't clear one of these angles ahead of time, what they need to do then is they need to take this and they need to try to survive long enough from all these angles that Chengdu are taking on them. If you're unable to survive within the first few seconds, right, you're going to probably instantly lose this as a brawl. And that's exactly what happens, right? Kepster's able to get a kill onto Late Young, right? They're able to get Late Young, but Rez will come out and look at how easy Chengdu make that fight look, right? They make it look a lot easier than it was supposed to. Okay. So going back to this, I'll go back to this first fight and I'll show you what I mean by tic-tac-toe real quick. And then I'll kind of go through these fights in a little bit more detail, kind of show you why and how these people set up their angles. And again, why it's so strong to play angles, angles, angles. And you're going to see me always, always, always stress it. Okay. So, tic-tac-toe. What is tic-tac-toe? Well, tic-tac-toe is a very simple game that I like to utilize to determine space. So for people that watched a little bit of the macro review before, I believe it was last week, you kind of know this already. I showed you this. For those that are kind of new, I'm going to show you. I'm going to explain it the best I can based off of what I know. So to break down first in layman terms, in Overwatch, you'll hear coaches always talk about lanes or sides. I'll use the terminology of lanes for now. And the best way I can put it is there's vertical lanes and there's horizontal lanes, right? So for now, I will draw the, well, I'll do it like this so that I can kind of be a little bit more correct in terms of viewpoint based off of the cart. Horizontal lanes, right? How am I looking? Well, usually wherever the cart's path is, that will always be a main lane. So the lane will look kind of like this. This is kind of skinny. Whoop. There we go. Okay. Doesn't mean that all the time there will be always like 3 lanes. Like sometimes there'll be more like 2 because of, fall off. But for theory's sake and for kind of learning sake, we're kind of gonna try to approach this as 3 angles for this first point, right? Move this a little bit to the side. Okay, you have your 3 lanes. You have left, you have mid, and you have right. Or if you really want to kind of go like in a little bit more detail, you have main, you have left side, and then right side, right? So these are your vertical lanes, right? And most of the time, we know like, oh, for example, like Glads right now is playing like this lane. They have, looks like big control of this lane. The left lane, they have control of. The right lane, there's not really a right lane. No one kind of controls this side right now. But then you need to think about this as well. Well, we're talking about horizontal lanes right now. Well, vertical lanes is also a thing, right? So if I were to erase this real quick and then show you vertical lanes, right? Well, how do I do vertical lanes here? Well, for me, vertical lanes is simple. It's like this. Okay. And again, we're looking this way, right? So we have this lane, and this lane. So in terms of this vertical lane, right? We have a little bit more congestion now, right? We have Glads playing this lane, and we have, realistically, we have Chengdu kind of playing this lane softly as well. We look towards this right side of the vertical lane, right? We have Chengdu playing very heavily in this right side. Then we look at the left, right? We don't have a lot of people playing this lane, but at the same time, we have realistically more control from the Glads here. So to kind of explain like lanes, by the way, in a little bit more detail, just so that I make it a little bit clearer for you guys. What I mean by lanes is I want
Hello
to
there.
split this up, particularly in a way where you, I don't want to say you understand, but like where you think about lanes as space. So think about it as when you play, I don't know, any sport, right? Let's take soccer as an example. I feel like everyone kind of knows soccer or football, like American football, something like that. You have mid, like the middle area of the field, right? And that's like midfield or quarterback or something like that, right? Then you have the left side players, like left side striker, right side striker, I think is what it is, or left side power, right side power for soccer. And then for football, it's left side, like your wide receivers, like you have left side wide receivers and you have your right side wide receivers. It's the same premise for Overwatch. I'm just breaking it down a little bit different. And again, like showing it, this is what it's like vertically, right? Because remember, think about it like this. Well, this looks more horizontal, but the horizontal, sorry. So like again, like you look at this, I'm breaking down the lanes horizontally, right? So again, this is the middle, right? This is the middle lane. This is technically, if I were to look at it this way, this would be the left lane, right? And then this would be the right lane, right? So it's just, I'm breaking down the map into three sections. I'm breaking it down into the left side, the middle, and the right side, right? And then it's the same thing. It's vice versa here, right? I go here to vertical. It's the same premise. I'm breaking down the map a little bit more. Instead of it looking at the map as a whole, I'm looking at it as that is, I don't know, like instead of left, middle, and right, now I'll look at it as this is the top lane, right? That's the middle lane. This is the bottom lane, right? Again, I'm just splitting the map into sections to better understand map control, right? To make it easier to digest and understand. So as I was saying, with regard to this vertical lane and then horizontal lane, I showed you two different variables. Now, like I said, there is vertical lanes and horizontal lanes, but why don't we just combine these lanes, right? Like we're gonna have to utilize these lanes anyways to understand, right? So now, take this terminology out, take this terminology out, and we'll do this. Ready? Huh. Huh. This seems pretty peculiar, right? Like, I just combined the horizontal and the vertical lanes, and I kind of have a game of tic-tac-toe right in front of me. Weird, huh? Not like it's anything to do with the name at all, tic-tac-toe, but there it is, right in front of you. This is a tic-tac-toe board right in front of you, right? X's and O's, whatever you want to call it, right? And this is from combining the vertical and horizontal lanes. Now, unlike tic-tac-toe, however, where you get three in a row and you win the game, we utilize tic-tac-toe, or I utilize tic-tac-toe in a different way, right? So now we're gonna do it like this. Gladiators are pink, and hunters are yellow, okay? Hunters will be X, gladiators will be O's. Okay. So I'm going to mark in X's and O's who controls what spaces in this tic-tac-toe, right? And then this to me is kind of just contested between the two, right? And this is like a blank space, like there is nothing there. So why did I do this? Why am I showing this tic-tac-toe? What does this mean? Technically Chengdu would win because they're down, but realistically that's not what we use tic-tac-toe for. We utilize tic-tac-toe to understand potentially free space on the map that we can take based off of the space that teams control. So for example, in that blank space, if this was actually control, right, of a side or some sort of map, if I saw no one there in this corner here that I just circled in pink, right? If I saw no one there, then I would leave this blank. And this is a potential space that any team could take, right? It's vice versa with regard to um, the spaces that they control, right? You look at the spaces they control, Gladiators controls all that space. They're not contested right now for that space. It's the same thing with regard to over here, right? On this right side, you see that Chengdu does control this. Um, so something I will add is this doesn't always mean that they do control the space. Sometimes, like for example, that top left, like Glads doesn't actually quote unquote control that space. They control that space by neutrally being able to control the other space around it, right? You look at this L over here, right? They naturally should be able to control that corner or have control that corner, even if people aren't there, just based off of the other space they control, right? It's not all the time that will happen, but this is kind of like a general thought process behind it. So going back to how do you win tic-tac-toe in Overwatch, the game of tic-tac-toe space? Well, very simple. The way I understand or utilize it for angles and understanding angles is I utilize this to understand what angles my team can take, and not just what angles my team can take, but I look to utilize this to understand how much of the map am I really controlling, right? Am I being proactive with my space on the map? Right now, I would say you see the defender advantage here, right? They have majority of the map control compared to Glads. And that's how it should be on defense. That's how most of the time it will be, right? And obviously this tic-tac-toe will change as they go and move, and I'll show you in a quick moment, right? But now I look at this, how you win tic-tac-toe in terms of space management is by being the team that has majority of the control of the space, right? You have most of your X's or O's filling these spots, right? Because most of the time then, especially if you're playing for angles, if you control majority of the space, right, you should have control of multiple angles as well, right? So we're going to play this out, and we're going to kind of change this tic-tac-toe board from this first fight real quick, and I'm going to kind of show you a little bit more of what I mean, right? Ready? We pause. All right, you see this stuff? Like, look at this. Ready? I'll turn on the overview so you guys can see a little bit better as well, right? Okay. So what ends up happening here? Well, first things first, this is gone, this is gone, this is gone. This is, I guess, kind of still here. I guess skewed is here, so I guess we could count that as like a gladiator kind of thing right here. I believe Shu died more so towards that backspace there, right? Yeah, okay, he did. I don't know. I don't count this. Skew kind of like bashed there, so I don't count that. So we do this instead. Whoop, whoop. Lei Young still controls that. They control that. We're fighting for this, right? Gladiators is now under here. You have multiple members under here, right? And then the rest of that is free space. See how much control Glads like instantly look to give up as they're trying to go for a very fast-paced dive? And see how much space Hunters control, how many angles they're able to control here. This just goes to show you, yes, in theory, like this is obviously a theoretical model, but this is just how they moved across the board. And you see that Chengdu, based off of this defender perspective, right, utilizing defender objective and utilize these angles properly, they controlled majority of the map, majority of the space compared to Glance, who really only doesn't really that control that much space, right? And this goes into how do you take control of these chokes, right? How do I get past these chokes? Well, it's simple. Make it so that Chengdu on defense do not hold as much space as they are holding in that current spot. Because if they do hold a lot of that space, then most of the time you are setting yourself up for failure because you're not having control of a lot of the map. And this is why tic-tac-toe is a very good thing in my eyes, not just for an advanced person or a high-level coach, but for any kind of viewer. trying to understand and expand their knowledge in terms of how to take angles, why angles are important, why space is important, because of this. This is why angles are important. This is how angles are created, by controlling more space, right? And this helps you identify how much space they really control and how the angles, how easy it is for them to create those angles, right? And you see the effect it has on Glide. Glide went from controlling 4 squares to 2, and Chengdu went from controlling, I'm pretty sure, 5 squares or 6 squares to 5 squares again, right? That's crazy. That's how you want to kind of play this comp. You want to keep those angles. You want to keep that space, right? So I'll erase tic-tac-toe. We kind of understand tic-tac-toe a little bit more. I may pull it out again if I feel like I need to I can't say words today, but to put more emphasis on a point. Sorry. I don't know why I'm so bad at I'm so bad at words. I'm sorry. But anyways, continuing on here. This is one fight out of about the 4 fights or 5 fights that Glads kind of took, right? I missed a follow. Haas00312, thank you for the follow, man. Appreciate it. Hopefully you are learning a little bit from the stream so far. Glad to see you in here. But now you look at this, right? Overall across the board. Now we look and we see Chengdu are controlling the space again. We see how Chengdu are setting up this time. It's almost exactly the same, right? How are Glads looking to set this up? This time Birdling's trying to go into that right side by himself, right? He's unsuccessful. Now look at this. They're still setting up a kill box over here, right? But how many angles are they really kind of playing here? Well, 1, 2, technically 3 because Leave is over here, right? They still have those 3 angles. Jinmu is over here, right? But again, we'll put that in context of playing the same angle as Monk, right? And then you have Lee Young over here on the wall.
Hello there.
Like, look at this. Look at the angles they have. The angles, boys. The angles, okay? It's crazy insane how many angles these guys have. 4 angles? Geez, like, this is revolutionary. Now let's see how this fight ends up going from the fact that they have so many angles. How does Glads try to approach this? Do they try to force out one of these angles? What are they going to do? Well, I'll show you in a moment, and it's not pretty, I hate to tell you. Su gets booped off. The rest of Glads are forced back, right? Mainly from the boop, but you see that the rest of Chengdu are ready to potentially pounce on the kills there, right? Now again, we reset, we go back into it. We look at the ults from Hunters. Hunters have a lot of ults online. We see Hunter's positioning here. What are Hunter's positioning looking like? Gaga is trying to fight the people in the back. This is good from Glads. Glads are now trying to force Chengdu instead of looking all at one side, right? Because remember, they've been looking, all Chengdu's had to look at this first 2 fights is look here, right? So it's good that Glads are setting up people in the back so that it forces Chengdu to not have to only look here, right? So this is good. They draw Gaga back. This could give them really good choke control, right? But does it? Will it really? Let's see. That EMP, terrible. Hits no one. Leave is too far. He's trying to play max range EMP, which is not the play. But overall, we look in terms of setup here, right? He also missed his Shu because Shu goes in the tunnel. That's the big person that he was trying to go for here. We look at this, right? Angle, angle, angle. Monk is safe on high ground here. Again, he's playing in a position where it's really hard for him to do anything bad, right? Gaga is kind of dueling both at the same time. It doesn't matter that he's not part of this. Look at this. They still have 3 angles. Potentially, they could try to execute off the CMP. Again, they're playing this beautifully, right? They're still in a potential position where Monk can still assist the tanks and potentially Pharah. He can't assist the Sombra, but Sombra can translocate out, right? So again, how they're playing this, great. Love this kind of play from Chengdu. Unfortunate that Leave does not hit the EMP, right? Now you see what happens. Chengdu try to kind of approach this. They aren't able to get the angles. They aren't able to get the kills. Monk is now kind of stuck here on the high ground. Let's see how they look to restabilize and play based off of 3 people in this little tunnel area, right? And let's see how they look to play with Monk getting a little bit of pressure on him here, right? Okay, real quick, we're going to look at perspectives again. I see Leave was forced to translocate out. That's fine. He's potentially in a position to assist Monk. We consistently see Yveltal being ready to pocket Jinmu or pocket Monk if he needs it. Late Young, he's walking up potentially to enable Jinmu or to potentially enable Monk here, right? We consistently see multiple options for these people. But you look at this here in the tunnel, right? You see a sandwich here. I see Gaga that's coming over here from behind, and I see the Pharah coming from the other way, right? In terms of here, yes, Monk is here and he potentially can get sandwich, but I have a Mercy that can go assist him and I have a Diva that can go assist him over here, right? Again, how they're looking to utilize these angles and play off each other. Brilliant, beautiful so far. And even though Monk dies here, right? Whoop, he still gets rezzed. And we look at this, right? Glads are, even though they're getting these kills, right? They're not able to continuously chase these kills because of where the cart was, right? So they're not able to keep going really hard to get more and more of these. And now let's see how they look to retake this on the side of Hunters, right? They back up, they give up some space. They're playing more so back. As a point in terms of looking at EMPs and how EMPs didn't really hit their mark during this series. Sorry, I'm going like a little bit too fast here. But if you look at this, right? We looked at Leaves EMP just out of position, right? We look at Birdring's EMP. Look at where his team is. Can his team follow up this EMP? Do they have angles on this EMP? No and no. So this EMP is almost practically useless. They didn't get anything from this EMP, right? If anything, maybe Ball can follow up, but what's Ball gonna do? Ball's not gonna be able to kill anything, right? They have nothing to close this distance. They have no long range damage. A little bit too fucking fast there by Birdring. Right? And you see how forced Glads are doing this. And Glads, again, they're not doing this from multiple angles like Chengdu did with their engagements. They're doing it from one angle, which makes it much easier to kite this back, much easier to protect themselves, right? Again, let's see Chengdu. Give me the angles, baby. Let me see these angles that you're going to set up. All right? We see the Nano is going to come out. What does these angles look like, guys? All right. We see Leave is already set up. Boom. We see Pharah is conking and aggressive. We see Leave is playing pretty much the same angle. Monk is playing this top angle. They're kind of playing similar angles. Gaga is looking to wrap around. They are looking to create three angles. Let's see if Gaga does successfully wrap around here. Goes towards the backline instead. Is it the worst thing in the world? No, because you had two angles at least coming here, right? And remember, I said three angles is what I want, but two angles ain't that bad, right? Especially since Gaga is trying to delay these supports and force them to hide, right? This is pretty good. Was Glad set up to intercept those angles? Or Glad set up to go really aggressive with those angles? No, they were not. If you notice, they were all sitting in one area over here, right? They're not playing the angle game as strong here. They're not ready for the retake from Hunters. They're not set up to intercept with their angles, right? They were a little bit slow. They weren't ready for the setup. And then now all this comes down to is Hunters don't even have to play the angle game. They just clean up the kills at this point, right? Retake, bueno. You had angles when you went for an engagement and you utilized an ult to fully boost one of those angles' powers with pure damage, right? Now we have a minute left, and we have some ults online from Hunters. Let's see if they continuously try to go for this similar or same setup, right? And let's see if Glad's allowed them to. 60 seconds remaining. Whoop. Okay, we're going to pause here, right? Go here. Again, look at this positioning. Only difference is he's spamming really, really hard now. Late Young is pretty much just protecting that tunnel area. That's fine. And the Monk's playing the same area too, like, right? So I'll kind of erase that. Monk is like playing like this. Like Pharah's playing kind of same angle. Diva is not a part of this, right? So instead of 4 angles, you have 3 angles here. That's still pretty damn good considering, right? So how does this work? How does this change? Well, look at this, right? He goes back. Glads, did they try to clear that Pharah? No, they did not. They left that Pharah to their own devices. Did they try to clear a lane? They tried to clear the lane with Ball with 3 people. Did it work out? Nope. Ball, all he had to do was walk backwards. And now they're all stuck in the same kind of square for tic-tac-toe, right? They're not utilizing that space properly. They're not looking to displace one of the more important people in the angles, which is The Sombra or the Pharah, right? This is just, at this point, this isn't even angles. This is just Jinmu hitting insane shots. The rest of them are still set up very aggressively, which is nice to see, right? But watch this now, right? Use that to kind of peel. Now watch what happens as these guys go onto the cart. Or as they try to go touch the cart and they're forced to kind of back off. You still see Jinmu hugging that left side, 2 people going over here, right? You're still seeing people try to take more than 1 angle compared to 3 angles, right? And again, this is a little bit easier on defense, right? On attack, it's much harder because you have to try to get through this choke. But remember, this is the strength of Chengdu, and when they play these compositions, they're so strong because, as you can see, they always had control of the map on this defense. They never gave up too much control unless they really needed to. And whenever they tried to do anything, they were very successful because of all the angles they held. They tried to at least hold 3 angles all the time. You saw in some situations they held 4 angles. In some situations they did 3 angles. Only in one situation they held 2 angles, right? And that's the key thing. Angles, 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 dive, any DPS-centric composition. Angles are the name of the game. Space is the name of the game, right? And that is why it's so important and why hunters are so strong on these DPS comps. Because they understand how to play these angles. They've been doing it since Season 2, guys. Remember, they were the team that played DPS against goats. I studied that team. I did DPS against goats. And do you want to know what ended up happening? I learned how to break apart and split apart them just from utilizing and abusing angles, right? And then utilizing ultimates to kind of help you in that favor, right? It's really hard to, once you teach the team how to utilize angles in a proper way, it's really, really hard to try to displace them, right? Zeus Ames, thank you for the follow, by the way. Sorry, I missed out on there. Hopefully you're enjoying the content and learning some things. Thank you for kind of tuning in. But again, like, you look at this, right? Like, angles, angles, angles. I'm going to always say this when I see DPS comps or dives or anything centric around DPS. Angles, 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 angles. So that when you see these kind of comps, the first thing you think about is, are they taking angles? Are they playing space properly? What are they doing? Well, let's look at attack, and let's see how Chengdu approached this time around, right? So right when they go through the choke, the first thing I want to see is space control, right? And we're going to look at it right about... No, I'm going to pause. Okay. I know that he has that boop there, but let's look at this here, okay? Let's pull out the good old tic-tac-toe sheet, guys, okay? All right. We made this a little bit longer, but, you know, same premise. Okay, same thing. Oop, X. O, whoop, wrong color. O's, right? All right. All right. I guess in technicality, Glads controls this, right? I look at Chengdu here, right? Okay. Chengdu, Chengdu, Chengdu. Chengdu should kind of control these here. Oh, wow. Huh. Looks like Chengdu is already taking a little bit more control of the choke than the rest of Glads, huh? Glads are kind of playing really stacked, eh? Let's see how Chengdu kind of look to spread out after this, right? I see now that Kevster's on this side, right? Kevster's looking to control this side over here. This is cool, right? Now we see, oh, well, hello, hunters. You're going to control this now. We're going to get rid of this. Huh, Glad's probably by default now doesn't have control of this. Huh, so like a little bit of contention here, and Chengdu has a lot of control. Do I think that's a good or bad thing? I think that with Arista comps, you should be playing a little bit more stacked. But where is more control of the space here from Glads, guys? I want more control. I want more space control. I want more angles than these 2 angles that you guys are playing. Yes, technically Kevster is playing a separate angle, but we look at this verticality, even though he's playing a separate lane, like, these guys are practically playing almost the same lane almost. Look at this. And then these guys are playing here, like, what? You have a diva, man, like a diva. You do not have to play stacked on this Orisa at all times. Like, you can play towards the ground here more, something, right? Like, you don't always have to. Shu can pressure that Pharah if you need to, right? Whoop, that's not what I want to do. That's also not what I wanted to do. Okay, let's erase this now. Okay, let's see how Chengdu looks to push in and do this here. And now we look at Jinmu and how Jinmu is looking to play this space. Look at this. Jinmu is now rotating. They're all rotating. Technically, they have a little bit of control of that side, right? Not fully, but they have some control. They're controlling here. They're controlling main. They're controlling over here. Jinmu's going to move to over here and over here. We look at the rest of Glads. Glads, what the heck are you doing? I know you have to touch the point, but geez, Louise, you've pretty much given control of gas. Like, oh, you're like relying on someone to pop off. Like, oh, what is this, man? Where's the control? Like, look at this. Look at this space. Look at this. It's crazy. It's mind-boggling. Like, oh my goodness. Now, like, Kester's given up this control so that he can have control over here. Technically has control over here, right? And over here potentially soon. Monk has control towards back here. They have control of over here. They probably don't have control of gas anymore. It's more so over here, right? Gosh darn, guys. Like, what the heck? Do I think that Glads won that because of control of space? I feel like they were getting backed into a damn corner. And the main reason that opened that up was they got that pick on to leave. They don't get that pick on to leave. I feel like that game goes kind of more differently in the side of Hunters. Like, that's just on Kevster's mechanical skill. Like, I'm going to back up and I'm going to show you exactly what I mean by that. Back up and just watch this. He's going to one clip leave, okay? Ready? We're going to speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up. Right? He's just shooting, he's just shooting. Watch this. He gets pulled up. He sees lead. He literally out-mechanicked the living crap out of that guy. Like, god damn, dude. Like, Jesus. He just popped off and one-clipped that guy. Can you rely on that every single time? God, no. But the amount of times that Glad, I feel like in this particular series, relied on an individual play like that to just win, fucking nuts. Like, that's not even macro. That's just, he's so goddamn good at the fucking game that he was able to pull that off. Like, that's crazy, right? And sometimes that is what it comes down to. Sometimes you just have that good of a player to just turn the tide in your favor like that. But against normal teams, right? Against teams that don't have cracked out players like Kevster, you're losing this. It's good that Kevster identified, I need to look for something here. I need to look for a player, or else we're just going to lose the game solely. Like, look at all this space we're giving up, right? He went third tempo because no one's looking at him. They're focused on the point, and that's when he got his opportunity. Again, great fucking play from Kevster, but, like, again, Glads, where's the space control? Where's the angles, bro? Chengdu, like, you were playing that good. Like, nice job, champs, but sadly, you lose out from mechanical outplay. It's unfortunate, but it happens from time to time. It's nothing to kind of really be worried about. Shake it off and kind of just go from there, right? Which goes into this next fight. We have good alts online from Hunters here, right? How are they going to look to play the space game? Now we're back into the races. We're going to see what Hunters do here in terms of trying to play this map control versus Gladiators. Let us see if they go the exact same route and do the exact same thing from both teams here, friends. This time we'll go with the icons instead of the tic-tac-toe, and let's see how we're going to do this. Oh, we see that Kevster's denying point. We see the spam coming out, and it's gone. And I'm Gladiators, and I control pretty much this part of the map, and Hunters control all of this map. Woo! Beautiful. Don't even try to fight for space. Don't even try to do anything. Let's just play in Narnia and hope for the best, guys. Yeah. What's gonna end up happening here? Well, we kind of gave control of this gas, so this is gonna be a kind of big angle. All of mid is kind of free. Potentially, like, going through here is free too. We kind of like, this is over top, so this is technically like 3 angles, I think. Yeah, like about 3. Jinmu was able to close so much space as well for him to potentially make a very successful play. Let's see what happens here. Huh. 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 Yeah, I mean, seems like you gave up a lot of space and then played into angles, and then kaboom went the dynamite, and you just kind of lose. And again, yes, I know that Glads have only this much of the point to play around, but where the bloody hell is your angle control? You need to play more angles. Jeez Louise, bro, like, do it, or else you're gonna just lose like that every single time, right? And this goes back to what I was talking to you guys about today, about our concept review. And our concept review, as simply as it was, angles. Why are angles important? What do they do? What's the strength of angles? How do they do? Well, again, angles, strength. We look at this. It makes the game really easy. It splits up the enemy team. If it doesn't split up the enemy team, it makes it really hard for a team to survive if they don't clear out these angles, right? You're able to almost instantly win in a lot of these situations, right? Well, what else about angles? Well, how do we set up ease? Well, you look at it all the time. The characters that are able to easily take an angle, and remember, angles don't just mean X and Y axes, up and down, right, and left to right. It also means uh up and down. Sorry, my apologies. It's not X and Y where it's forwards and backwards and side to side or left and right. It's also up and down, right? Farah controls up and down axes. She controls his Z axes. So that means she's able to take a third angle in the air really easily, right? And that's the thing about Farah. You can take these third angles super easily because you're in the air. No one else can literally take that angle from you. Even if you're right on top of somebody, that's still a different angle because you're shooting from a top while one is shooting from straight ahead, right? Different angles. Even though they're still set up on the same kind of area, it's a different plane. Yeah. So ease of angle setup, right? Like you see that the tanks or the people that are really mobile, they're holding close. They're playing the more dangerous angles. You see the ones that are able to set up behind more easily. The Tracer you saw from the side of Gladiators. You saw Sombra from the side of Gladiators and Chengdu, right? Ball sometimes just going behind because they can make it there. They can go there very easily, right? And then the ones that can't take the angles very easy, right? The Ana, yeah? We thought about Ana. We thought about potentially looking more so at maybe a Hanzo. Not as easy to hold those angles. They can hold angles still a little bit, but they might have to give it up a little bit longer or play more longer angles, safer angles, right? Because they're very still susceptibly weak to certain characters, right? And then the last thing, right? I believe I missed a point here, but like the last thing I'll kind of bring up that I feel is super, super important. Tic-tac-toe. Always, always remember tic-tac-toe, ladies and gentlemen, right? And then on top of this, you add to this the two things you got to always keep in mind here, right? You win over time. Even though Chengdu won in a lot of these situations, they won over time, right? They didn't win from they won from instant execution a lot of the times based off of being not being cleared, but you also saw in these longer fights, they were coming out on top a lot of the time. What ended up happening was some like in that first fight, for example, when they're on attack, they were winning that overtime. They were forcing them in a corner. They won because of Kepster's mechanical outplay. I bet you they didn't do that. No success. No nothing. They probably lose that fight. Right? And the second thing is just understand, right? Like again, very, very, very strict with this, right? Space, please, for the love of God. Like play the space properly. Slash the angles, right? And I said 3, right? 3 angles is the minimum you should be aiming for. If you really direly cannot, 2 angles, please, at least 2. And you see now how space and angles are coincided with one another, right? Um, and why it's like so important to talk about this, right? And like that's where I think that was what my third point was just angles, like number of angles or something around those lines. Whoop, number of angles. And that's it. That's a concept review on angles and why they're so strong and why you should not underestimate angles at all and how to identify the angles and then how to play around the angles. All right. That's it for the angle concept review. Nothing more. I'm done. Hashtag rant done.